You know how to create frames, you know how to create grids, you know how to create shapes, but we haven't talked yet about shape parameters, because out of just one shape, you can create so many things. And the most powerful shape, in my opinion, is rectangle. Because out of a rectangle, you can create so many different shapes. Just look at this example here. We have just a 100 by 100 pixel square. Out of this square, we can create a rectangle, tall rectangle, rotated rectangle, rectangle with a rounded corners, rectangle with just a couple of rounded corners, not all of them, then squircle. Then we have a rectangle, a square with stroke. Out of that, we have a rectangle with a shadow, drop shadow, blot rectangle, soft UI element, or some people call it neomorphism. When I created it first, back in like 2019, I called it soft UI. So soft UI, then circle. Yeah, you can create a circle out of a rectangle, and not just circle, but you know this element that is used so many times when you're creating buttons. Boom, same shape, it's just a rectangle, but you can create so many different things when you know what parameters to change and how to work with them. Now let's create some of the shapes so you understand where we are starting from. And also we'll be working not only with rectangles in this lesson, but also with all the shapes and all the parameters that you can think about. Let's dive in. So when we're talking about parameters, remember that on the left, in the left sidebar, we have pages and we have layers. On the right sidebar, we have parameters. By default, when we selected just canvas, we see parameters for our canvas. But when we create a shape, again, let's create a shape here, just like a rectangle. Or if you remember, press R, click, 100 by 100 pixels rectangle is created. And on the right side, when the shape is selected, you see all the different parameters for this shape. We'll be talking about alignment parameters a little bit later when we'll be working with more than just one shape at a time. Today we'll be talking about these parameters that you see here and also all other parameters. By the way, if we are talking about parameters in general, take a look what we have here. We have a couple of sections. The first section is related to position of the element, its size, and also rotation, and including rounded corners here. The second one is constraints. We'll be talking about constraints as a separate instance because it's really powerful feature in Figma, and when you know how to work with that, you will be able to create really mind-blowing things, including like speech bubbles and model screens. Just using constraints and understanding how they work, I'll show you, it's just perfect thing. So then we have layer, and here in the layer we just have one parameter, which is blend mode. We'll be talking about blend modes a little bit later as well. Then fill, in this case, particular case, fill color, but we'll cover again a little bit more because we'll have a specific lesson for each of these parameters. Today we'll be talking specifically about this section. And while we think, oh my god, it's just so simple, it's just Y position, X position, width, height, rotation, and rounded corners. What else can it be here? But honestly, everything that you see here up to this element, up to here, I'll change it to so it will be visible. All the shapes were created just changing these parameters here. So that's why let's start with that, and then little by little we'll cover all other shapes. First of all, what you need to create, just create a rectangle, just any rectangle. You can create not 100 by 100, but whatever size you want. But then, once you created it, we'll start playing with them. Even before we start changing parameters in our changing values in our parameters section, you can take a look at the shape itself, and when you hover on it and start dragging the shape, you are changing X and Y position. Yep, when you do anything here, you see that X and Y position is changing. When you use arrows like up and down, right and left, shift and up, shift and down, you know about nudge amount right now, so you know how much the position will change. So this is what we can change immediately from our keyboard and also just from the interface without changing anything here. The next thing that you can change also is when I'm hovering here, I can rotate the shape. Holding shift, I can rotate it by 45 degrees. And also here I see when I close enough to the shape, I see these dots here, and when I hover in them, I see radius. And when I start dragging it inside, it's changing the radius here, the corner radius. Boom, like that. Also, what's really cool, as you can see, I haven't started using the values parameters yet. But here, you can also shift Option or Alt on Windows, and you will see this dot will appear here. And then, when you drag, you can change just one corner radius, the radius of just one corner. And this is how you can create, without going to the values parameter, you can change the radius of this shape, and you can achieve the effect that you are thinking like, oh wow, I don't need to change anything in the values parameters. I can change everything here. And the final thing, of course, that what we can do from here, when I'm hovering on the right or left side or bottom or top side of the rectangle, I can change its width or height. And when I'm hovering on the angles, I can change width and height together. And by holding shift, I'll keep the proportions. And by holding shift and Option, I will change the proportions. I'll change the width and height proportionally, but from the center of the shape. This is what you can do just by working and playing with the shape itself without going to parameters themselves. And I, again, because this is a pro secrets course, I want to give you one pro tip on what you can do without going to parameters. So first of all, let's change our shape size to 100 to 100, so you will see what exactly is happening. When you're holding Command, or if you're using Windows, when you're holding Control, on Mac it's Command, I'm holding it. I hope that you see that I'm pressing a particular button here, because I added an additional tool that allows you to see it. So I'm holding Command, and now I'm pressing a couple of times the right arrow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you see the width is changing. This is the hotkey that you can use if you want to change the size of anything, not only shapes, but also frames. When you created, for example, a frame like this one, when you're holding Command, you can change the size, the width and height of it just by holding Command. But if you're holding Command and Shift, Command, Shift, and arrow right, you see that the size is changing, the width is changing by the amount of nudge that we said before. Now you know how to change it. So this is what you can do super fast and easy. When you need to increase the size of the shape by, let's imagine, 12 points, you press 1 and then you stop holding Shift, just holding Command, 1, 2. And now it's the size, the width is 12 pixels. The shape is 12 pixels wider. The same command shift down, and this is how I'm changing the width and height of this element just using my keyboard. And this what will make you super efficient, because lots of people, I would say about, I can say that a particular number, but from in the company where I worked, people didn't know and didn't use the hotkeys, the shortcuts that allowed them to save so much of their time when they were designing. So I recommend you to use this thing. The next thing, I haven't created a dedicated lesson for that because I want to cover it here. What you need to know that in Figma, another Figma Pro secret, you can use math in your values of the particular parameter. For example, we have X position, and X position is, this is the X position and Y position related to the parent element. And the parent element for this rectangle is our frame, which means that if I set X and Y to 0, 0, our rectangle will be here. When I set it to 0 and 0, now it's there. Now, what interesting, what you can do here in Figma, let's set our Y position to 680 in this case and X to 20. In Figma, you can change the value by using math functions like plus, minus, multiply, divide. So I can change the X position to 40 just simply by multiply 2, enter, and now it's 40. Now I can increase it by 50 pixels plus 50, and now it's 90. You see how it's jumping here. The second thing that I can do, I can divide it by 3 and then it will be 30. And I can set minus 14, now it's 16. So this is what you can do for absolutely any parameter here, even here, minus 2, done, 150. Minus 50, done, 100, minus 30, 100. You can set it immediately, but sometimes it's really useful to use these math functions because they will allow you to create a particular shape when you don't know exactly what it should be, but it should be just about like 5 times bigger. And then this is how you can do that, and you can change these parameters. The second thing that I also want to show you in the parameters section, that when you're hovering on the label of the parameter, like here, you see that my cursor is changing to arrows that go left and right, which means that when I click and drag left or right, the arrow become wider. It means that now I'm in an active mode, and I can change the width or height or just any parameter just by dragging left and right. And this is how you can change fast, pretty fast enough, this parameter. The value of this parameter, which is width in this case. The next thing was also important to know about this particular section where we have X position, Y position, width, height, rotation, angle, and corner radius, is that you can turn the constraint proportions on by clicking on this icon. And now when I change, not here, when I change the parameters, particularly here, when I multiply it by 2, boom, I have 200 by 200. The second thing, if I minus 100, it's 100 by 100. Proportions. Remember about them because sometimes it can set by default as constraint proportions on, and you're changing the parameters and you see that the entire shape is changing and you just wanted to change width. What's happening? Take a look at the constraint proportions section here, and maybe you need to turn it off. Next thing is our rotation. We can rotate it by 15 degrees or with plus 40, now it's 55. So basically the rotation also you can change right from these parameters. If you want to set a particular amount, like let's imagine 70, it will be hard for you to set to 70 from this panel. It takes time. The second thing, if you're holding shift, you can't jump to 70, which means that it will be just much easier and faster to set to 70 right from here. And the final parameter from here is our corner radius. Let's set our rotation to 0. And the corner radius, you can change it, as I said, here from this panel, or you can change the corner radius from here. Let's imagine like 20. Usually when you're creating buttons, for example, when you're creating buttons for, let's imagine, Android mobile application. So then in this case, the width can be 100, but the height usually 48. And by default, this is what Material Design brought. Material Design, the first version of it, what they used for the corner radius, they used 4 points or 4 dp. This is what they called points. 4 points for the corner radius. That's it. Later, today, if you take a look at the Material Design 3.0, they usually go to rounded shapes. And in this case, what you can do, you can set absolutely like super crazy number here, like 2000, for example. And now you have rounded corners fully here, which means that even if I change the height of this element, I will still have rounded corners. But if you want particularly have rounded corners for like left and right edge rounded, so you can just set half of the height, which is 24, but it means that when you change the height, it will still be 24. So you will see this shape. What else you can do, because now you know math functions, 48 divisible by 2. So take the value of the height, divide it by 2, and then you will have 24 for your particular shape. Super valuable and useful function here. In addition to that, of course, I have to cover one additional thing. Back in, I don't know, probably 2010 or so, Apple presented not the rectangle with the rounded corners, but the shape called squircle. By default, if you take a look at this shape, you can see that from the points perspective, because everything, all the vector shapes are created out of points and connection between these points. So here, when we are talking just rounded corners, when you take a look at this dot here, it creates a shape that goes exactly in both directions, but it creates this harsh connection between these two. These two lines, the one that comes from our corner radius and another one that is the edge of our shape. But when we are talking about squircle, it makes that particular point a little bit rounder. So what it looks like, before I show you this squircle, what it looks like, it's like you take the point here and you change its value, but also you rotate it a little bit, just a little bit, to create much smoother connection between edges of the shape. And by default, Figma created it, and Figma created a default value for that. So here we have our 100 by 100 points square with a radius 20 points. But when I click on this parameter here, independent corners, and then I will see the option for corner smoothing. I click on that, and then I can set the iOS parameter, which is 60%. And now you see that this shape looks a little bit different than this one. It's much smoother. Let's take a closer look. It's much smoother, and you don't see this kind of corner. We see it only with our eyes. It's just an optical thing. But with the squircle, you don't see it. Why it's called squircle? Because it's a connection of like intersection of square and circle. Squircle. This is why they call it. And if you want to go a little bit further with that, with smoothing, you can go up to 100%, and then you will achieve this shape. Sometimes people using that, but it's not a natural shape, and also, you know, it's good for games. It's really amazing when you're creating some, you know, fun elements. If you want to add a little bit different mood, like funny mood, to your design, then I recommend you to use like smooth 100%, but smoothness of the corner 100%. But in general, it's not a good practice because people can notice it, and at the same time, it doesn't create a right feeling. So my recommendation to you, if you are not creating particular mood, particular style of your design, just go with a regular rounded corners or use squircle, which is iOS mode. One additional thing that I want to show you, that as I said, when you click on this parameter, you see that you can change your corner radius independently. When you select on each particular value, you see that this icon is changing. Now it means that we will change the top left corner, this one top right corner, then bottom right, then bottom left. This is how it goes, which means that I can set the top left to 0, top right will be 20. By the way, I press tab key on my keyboard to jump to the next parameter. Boom, to 0, and this is the shape that I will achieve, where only two parameters will be 20, 20, and I can go even with 420, 420. This is the shape that you can create just by using independent rounded corners. Talking about the tab key, when you are here, for example, at X position, when I press tab, I jump to Y position. I press tab, I go to width. Press tab, I go to height. Tab, I go and can set the proportions, rotation, the next element, the next, and this is how I can jump through everything just using my keyboard. The next thing, the final one, I just want to show you that also sometimes you can change the parameters not by holding, for example, I want to change width by 8 points. I want to increase the width by 8 points. I'll press Command Shift arrow right and then Command 2 times arrow left. So now it's 120. Or I can click directly here in the value and I can press the arrow up or down to change the parameters. And by holding Shift, you're also changing it by the amount of nudge that you are using. This is how you can change all these parameters. Now let's take a look at all the shapes that I created, how to create them. Again, press R, 100 by 100. The second thing that we are going to use, I press Option, Shift, and drag it to right. I'm doing it to duplicate the shape and move it to the right without changing Y position. You remember that when I'm holding Shift, I'm changing the position only in one direction. And in this case, I pressed Option to duplicate to create, or Alt on PC to change the position. Now I can change width. I can create another shape and I can change height. I create another shape and I change the rotation. I create another shape from here and I can change rounded corners directly from here, for example. I can create another shape, and by holding Option or Alt, I can change only the corner radius of these two sides. Now I create another shape and I can smooth the corners to create a circle, and all other shapes we will cover, and including changing the color of it, we will cover in the next lessons where we'll be talking about all other parameters. For now, just play with that. I'll be honest with you, the more you work with these simple things, they're super simple, they're kind of obvious, but the more you play with them, the more efficient you become when you're creating something sophisticated, when you're creating something complex. Because it will be super easy and for you to play with the shape, to change their radiuses, to create the shapes that you want super fast and easy, while other people will be just setting parameters and understanding how to do that. You will do it super fast and easy by doing these modifications in a blink of an eye. This is what you can do. So that's why I recommend you to practice. Practice with simple things, with fundamentals, with basics, and then go further and further and further. You know, it's always much easier to learn something when you go step by step. At this level, on this level, you learn this thing. On the next level, you learn something more complex. On the next one, you went to the next position, and so on and so forth. And then when you, like 100 steps from the point where you started, you become a master of the tool. And this is what I want you to become. I want you to become a master of Figma. So Figma will be just a tool for you, because you will be focusing on design rather than the tool. Because people want from you results, which is design, rather than how you use the tool. And you can deliver more results, better results, faster results when you know the tool and when you're not focusing in it. I'll see you in the next lesson where I'll be talking about field parameters, and it will be super fun and cool because there are so many parameters there, and some of the parameters will help us in our future modules where we'll be creating, for example, patterns. Yeah. So see you in the next